Welcome back to the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 68. Now, we are recording this on a Monday, so quick apology for that. But Saturday night or Sunday morning, depending on where you are in the world, was a pretty exciting one because we had UFC 306 at the Las Vegas Sphere card. Now, there was a lot of debate going into it. I think in the build-up, coming months and weeks, that Dana was overhyping it. And of course, we had very expensive, inflated ticket prices. And everyone was wondering, was the event really going to be worth it? And would it live up to the hype? I would say, for the most part, barring a couple of fights here or there, which I'm sure we'll get stuck into, that it did. What were your 2 cents?
Las Vegas or Las Vegas?
Which did I say?
You said Las Vegas, but I'm just thinking.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Is it not Las Vegas?
I don't know. I thought it was Las Vegas. No,
I don't think so.
Anyway, on the event, I'll be honest with you. I would love to sit here and say that I enjoyed it 10 out of 10, but as a UK fan, watching it at 4-5 a.m. is very difficult to stay dialed in, to be able to listen to storytelling and beautiful visuals. And whilst it was incredible, I'm not taking anything away from it, and whilst it was unbelievable that they managed logistically to put on a show like this, to be able to do the lights, the rigging, every piece of infrastructure that they typically have ripped up, put in a new location on essentially a few days' notice with a completely new technology at their fingertips. Seriously impressive. But as a UK fan watching at 5 a.m, really hard to be able to appreciate that in all of its details. So I think it's actually going to be one of those ones I have to go back and watch it 4 or 5 times to watch the stories unfold, to watch the details in the graphics and the design, because honestly, all of that and the detail in regards to the dress that they were wearing with the corner girls and just all the small layers that they added to it, I thought was fantastic. Could I appreciate it to its maximum? No, I couldn't, but I was a big fan.
I have to kind of agree with you there. I was almost thinking, kind of selfishly, can we get to the next fight?
Yeah.
Because I'm struggling to stay awake. My plan was to actually nap until the main card because I had a very long day. I was training in the afternoon and then I was out all evening and I was like, I don't think I'm going to make it through this one. But I couldn't nap because I was too excited. So I ended up firming through the whole thing. And I have to say, in those crunch hours at about 6 a.m. when Shevchenko was putting on, I will say impressive and clinical, but let's call it what it was. It was a pretty boring 25-minute win. I was fighting for my life a little bit, I have to say. So that was quite tough. But I have to say, as I said, from an artistic perspective, I thought it was fantastic. It really blew my expectations out of the water. I think when you look at how it started, a lot of people were a bit apprehensive because they didn't realize it didn't look like they were making full use of the big screens and everything at their disposal. But obviously, I think it was more of a teaser for what was to come. And as we opened up the main card, things really started to level up, visually. So I enjoyed it for the most part. It's just a shame the co-main and main event on the fighting front probably didn't live up to the expectations that we set. Because I think the rest of the card, I was saying actually in my Discord, chiming in on occasion, that I felt like it was on track to surpass UFC 300 in terms of the quality of fights. I thought pretty much from all of the prelims and through pretty much all of the main card was just fight of the year contenders. Joshua Van versus Edgar Chairez was absolutely unbelievable. And we'll get stuck into some of these in a minute. But Ode Osborne versus, who was it? My brain's just gone. Whoever it was, no disrespect to him. And of course, Daniel Zellhuber versus Rubovic, which was unbelievable. One of the greatest fights I've ever seen, particularly that. So the second or third round was just absurd to watch. When you start laughing middle of watching it because you can't really quite believe what you're seeing. That's how I was experiencing that one. And yes, of course, Diego Lopez had a very impressive performance. And then, of course, we can get stuck into the main event and co-main if we want to. But what were your 2 cents on a fighting front? How were you feeling?
There was one name that stuck out from that whole evening, and you didn't mention it.
Don't say. Raul Rosas Jr.
Incorrect.
Irene Aldana?
Incorrect.
Who am I missing? Say it.
Ignacio Barhamundez. Oh, okay, yeah.
That's what I mean, though. There's so many good fights.
No,
I'm even missing that one.
Stood out. This jumped off the paper to me. And what's funny is I was doing some research just off my own YouTube the other day. And for some reason, I just went back to the first 5 videos that I made. And it was a segment called Rising Stars a couple of years ago, a few years ago.
I think I've actually watched that.
And it was on Ignacio Barhamundez. And it was terrible. But it showed my passion for this fighter for a long time because he is sharp. National kickboxing champion, has that dog, working with Belal Muhammad. When you think about his career at the moment, he was just the imitation champion for Belal Muhammad, who is at the welterweight weight class, which is in and around where he's fighting because he's a 6'3" lightweight. He's massive. He's training with the very best in the world. He has incredible kickboxing. I know he's grappling 3 times a week because that's the schedule of that particular gym. He's working with the best and he just has a lot of exciting components. So when he came out with already a highlight reel knockout on Dana White's Contender Series with the front kick, Roosevelt Roberts with a spinning back kick like it was Edson Barboza. This man has some seriously viral knockouts. And then on the undercard of Sean O'Malley lands the exact same knockout, similar to Aljamain Sterling. Just fading backwards, cuts that slight angle, and then boom, right hand straight across the chin. You'll hear Trevor Whitman always speaks about getting knockouts is about going on a 45 degree with the punch across the chin to like snap it to the back of the shoulder. Exactly what he done. Fading back at 6'3" with that type of striking is a problem. I'm getting all my juices flying because Barhamundez is a seriously fun one to watch, and he got statement performance.
Yeah, very impressive. And I said this right before we recorded, just a quick change of pace before we get stuck into the main events. You're kind of looking like a fighter yourself with an almost bandage looking thing on your nose. What's going on there? Do enlighten us and myself and the listeners or viewers. What is happening with this little black piece of tape?
It's funny you say that because obviously with the TWC, we're working on toe wrestling championships for anyone uninitiated. We're trying to take all the right steps and all the necessary additions to the sport to legitimize it and people's perception of it. And we're doing that through a bunch of ways. And obviously, if you want to get into it later, we can. But one of those is I've started to reaching out to strength and conditioning coaches, to pediatrists, to nutritionists. So I'm starting to understand how to become the best athlete and tie that into toe wrestling so that the perception around the people competing is now becoming athletes, is how to recover better, is how to eat better, how to strengthen the core better for the wrestling, how to strengthen your patella muscle so it's more flexible and there's more strength within the range of motions. All of these levels is what I'm trying to do. So this is just one element of it. Now, these are actually nose strips. So for anyone that has like very clogged nose or sometimes deviated septums, you get a lot of fighters that have that. I even know people in like construction that get blocked, a lot with like dirt and things like that. It has that element to it. But in all honesty, it's, for me, I don't necessarily have that. But what it does do is still increases the airflow for me. But it just makes me be more intentional. And it just reminds my brain subconsciously just to nasal breathe, just to control my breathing with any sort of, whether I'm doing sport or whether I'm speaking on podcasts or in front of the camera, and just be more intentional with it. And when I'm sleeping, I've thought this is one of the best ways to recover. It's one of the least sexiest ways. So it's always a bit of a throwaway topic, but also it's the easiest one to do and just have these little hacks and just to leave it overnight. Whether they have little impact or maximum impact, the energy required for me is literally put this on my nose before I go to sleep, put it on my mouth tape before I go to sleep. So it's like
I've tried the mouth tape.
The output to reward, there's just a big disparity. So I've just been giving it all a go. And the last thing I'll say on it is also what I'm learning. This is more the creator side of things, but also what I'm learning is I've been seeing a lot of content around the TikTok shop and around how people have been generating commissions and how people have been running businesses off of it. 6-7 figure businesses off of TikTok shop. And I've just ignored it for a long time because I used to work in affiliate marketing and just subconsciously I was over that topic for a while. But I'm realizing the power of being able to work with brands that you want to work with authentic content, and then not having to do any of the procurement or the fulfillment of the product, the marketing, the shipping, and just make the straight commission off the top. And if you get better at creating content and you have an audience that has trust in you and value in you, and you're putting out valuable information, explaining things like recovery to people that are listening, then you can start getting purchases through the app and then making commission off the back end of that as well. So that's something that I've been working on. So that's a long answer, but that's what it is.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So just quick, again, abrupt turn back to the Sphere card. Of course, we did have the main event, Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili. Now, I think we can both hold our hands up and say we got this one wrong. From what I remember, I believe we both picked Sean to win in that fight. I definitely did, for one. I thought he would find that knockout. I didn't think Merab would really be able to enact, his will, use his cardio, use his pace. But he did. He did exactly that. And I almost felt like he found those takedowns a little bit more easily than I think many of us expected. Sean almost felt a little bit frozen up. I think you can draw a lot of comparisons to the Leon Edwards-Bilal Muhammad fight in many ways. Yeah, perhaps on a mental front.
Good shot.
Particularly with how quick that first shot came in and how easily Merab found it. And yeah, I mean, there's only really one word for it. I'd say it was domination. I know the scorecards didn't necessarily reflect that. It was 48-47 on two of the judges' scorecards, but I was thoroughly impressed. I mean, it was really, the fight was going to go one of two ways. It was going to be a Sean knockout or a Merab grind fest. I think that was what everybody predicted, and it ended up being the latter. And color me surprised, a little bit disappointed, but hopefully we get a good matchup in the future. I think it's hard to really get too excited about him purely on his style. How he tends to bring the fight. I love what he does outside of the cage. I think he's turned a lot of fans around because people forget that for a while he was the villain, public enemy number one. That whole thing with Aljamain Sterling holding up the bantamweight division. There was that infamous MMA Guru clip of him screaming a rant about why he hates him for many reasons. And I think that just added fuel to the flames. But I think over time, as we've seen over the last year, Merab's become a little bit of a fan favorite with what he's been doing outside of the cage, just being a bit of a wild man. And I know his in the cage style doesn't necessarily bring that same level of excitement or endearment, but at the end of the day, that's not his job. His job is to win. He's a champion, and he's done what he needed to do. What did you think?
Color me surprised when. That's just a little line I heard you say on that one, and it just made me think. The colored me surprised phrase, which I don't hear too often, is perfectly fitting for Sean O'Malley wearing black shorts. Now, I'm not saying he lost because he was wearing black shorts, but I'm being deadly serious when I say this was a contributory factor. I'm not sitting here saying the reason he lost that fight is because of those shorts. I am not. Let me preface that. But I am saying to some extent, that played a factor, to a percentage. Whether that be 1 or whether it be 42, I don't know. But to a percentage, that played a role. The interesting thing about predictions on fights is we speak about these on Sundays, typically, occasionally a Monday. But then there's a lot of work that I actually do on fight week in regards to breakdowns and watching their previous fights and ways that they've had successes or failures against different people. And it wasn't until the actual day or the day before that I'd done a breakdown on Merab and his recent game, and also Sean's deficiency against Cheeto in a very, very small segments of the fight when he managed to get backed up on what you saw on my TikTok.
Taking too many steps back. I don't know if it was you, but I saw an analysis of it. It might have been, but it was about him taking too many steps backwards, right? When pressure's invited. I saw that. Of course, we know he's so good with his movement, and in my head, that's just what I know and saw of him. And that is true. That's not anything has changed. And I know he goes out both stances. But there is times where people put combinations together or blitz him that he retreats in a linear line. Now, I didn't think that was necessarily going to be the case where he was going to get knocked out, let's say, a Steven Erceg versus Kai Kara France when he backs up.
and he lands that overhand left. I didn't think it was going to look like that necessarily, but I did think it would look like he could get to the legs. And I knew that he'd be able to get there. I knew he'd have some success. I knew Sean would have some success as well. And I think that is, for the most part, how it played out. But one thing that I also mentioned a while ago, which definitely played a factor, is, me included, we make so much of a point of Sean O'Malley and how good he is with his feints and his array of attacks. He freezes his opponents, right? But Merab does the same thing. He just doesn't do it as pretty. It's not as polished as a Sean O'Malley, but he's giving you so many different looks and level changes. He's constantly there. His boxing improves. His boxing has improved now. He goes single legs, he goes double legs, and he's constantly giving you that pressure. He freezes his opponents. And it was definitely clear, I think, or at least from my perspective, that Sean was getting froze by the looks of Merab, not vice versa. Yeah. I think the times when Sean took the sense, he was adamant and he was more bullish in his approach and said, no, I am in the middle, you're moving back. That's when he's had his success. Think of his teep kick. Same as Leon, right? You think of the teep kick in the fifth. That is an attack which, you can throw retreating, it's harder, and also you're more susceptible to the takedown. But when you're taking the center and you're dominating, you're hitting those teep kicks, you're more, that technique is more available, and that's one of his best weapons. So it's easy to say he should have done more than that, but I think 10 times out of 10, we maybe see a different approach from Sean.
I think it's just frustrating. That's what it is. Again, I hate to draw back the Leon fight again, but you look at when he took the front foot and really put on the pressure, and particularly within that last round when he started opening up Bilal with those elbows, he was probably a good 10 to 30 seconds away from finishing the fight. You could very much argue the same with Sean there, with that teep kick. But Merab was very much hurt from that shot.
You never see that, want to be.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it?
I think that's what Sean done a great job of, even in the Cheeto fight, and this fight, but he didn't do enough of it. But when he done it, it was successful. The straight right to the body, great weapon. And then the teeps. Because we speak about Merab being this machine, and he is, but everyone's susceptible to body shots. So if you know his cardio is going to be ridiculous, at least start wearing down the body so you can try and create somewhat of a more of an even playing field. And he done that, but he just didn't do enough of it. And the last thing I will say to you is, that's the frustrating thing, right? We say with the wrestler, it's not that easy to get them down. But also for the striker, in their head, they're just constantly thinking about mitigating this takedown because they're thinking, I don't want to be on my back anymore. I need to win this round. I need to let my strikes go. I can't. You think of Sean O'Malley's attacks, a lot of them, the knees, the teep kicks, all these things can be caught. And that does play with, it's a double-edged sword. So it's like, that does play with your mind. So I knew why he was sort of getting a little bit frozen at times, but hats off to Merab. It was so impressive again.
If I had to propose the question, I know this has almost kind of been answered by a lot of people, but who are you throwing against him next for the championship?
Okay, I'm going to be real about this. I've got two answers. The answer I would like, personally, is Davison Figueiredo. The answer that the UFC would like, and majority of the fan base would like, from a numbers perspective, Umar Nurmagomedov.
I'm in agreement with you.
Perfect poster child, man, kid, fighter, for the Middle East. Yeah, machine. Organization.
The actual machine, yeah.
For the Middle East, right? So you can imagine Turkey Al Sheikh doing some crazy cards with Umar. No, having the Nurmagomedov in your name is a cheat code.
Real talk. Was he at the fight? Wasn't he? He was on the.
Yeah, he was there. He was there with
that guy.
He was there with Bud Crawford, and it came up and said Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to bring that up, but every time he's on screen, though, he throws that horrendous jab. I don't know what he's doing. He reminds me of a toddler throwing a punch. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's the ultimate power play, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
so
I got to be careful what I say.
For this event. I paid for this event. You're going to see any combination I'm about to throw right now. So yes, I'm on TV to hundreds of millions of people, but I'm sitting here paying for all of this. So you will watch this 4-punch combination on your live TV. I love it. Big fan.
Yeah, you got to be careful what you say. That's what I'm saying. He's got the influence. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously we had the co-main event, Valentina Shevchenko versus Alexa Grasso. Obviously, we briefly touched on it earlier. I said, particularly on my stream, actually, I said this, but I believe my prediction on the pod was the same. I don't think I changed my mind at that point. The brain says Alexa Grasso. The heart says Valentina Shevchenko.
Yeah.
Because obviously I'm a big Shevchenko fan. I really wanted her to win, get her belt back. I do think she was done a bit harshly in that second fight with the judges, with the Mike Bell 10-8 scorecard, gifting, sorry, that voice crack, good Lord, gifting the draw, and obviously the belt going back to Grasso. So I feel there's a little bit of vindication here in this trilogy fight. I didn't expect it to be as dominating as it did, and I don't think many people did either, because usually when you look at fights like this, I'm always a big believer in age being a huge factor in MMA. The stats in that regard don't particularly lie. The younger, fresher fighter tends to have, on average, the higher success rate. So that was my logic going into it. I thought Grasso would probably just develop the game a bit more to really start to have the edge against Valentina. And I think on the other side of the coin, Shevchenko's skills sort of just slowed a little bit. Her mind got a bit slower. Just very small details, but at the very top level have a huge impact and can swing a fight. But that wasn't the case. Shevchenko looked far better than she had done in her last two fights, really. Very impressed. And obviously, we can't sit here and say it was exciting because it wasn't. But as I said, Valentina did what she needed to do. She used her grappling. But I, for one, I don't know how you feel about this. This was my 2 cents. I almost felt like she should have kept it standing, particularly in some of those later rounds. Because, when you're on the mat, you're inviting that inherent risk of a submission. And Grasso is a pretty good submission threat. It's where the majority of her finishes come from. And there was a couple of times in the second or third round where she was very close with an armbar or two, trying to set up a triangle, little things like that. I was a little bit worried. I thought, why wouldn't you, if I was Shevchenko's corner, stay on the feet in that fifth round? You're up on the scorecards. Just use your jab, stick behind it, throw a couple of leg kicks, and just work and win the fight with way less risk. I know she got the job done anyway, but that was just my 2 cents. I don't know if you felt the same way in that regard, but
yeah, I get what you're saying, but that would also have to mean that she thought the same thing. If she had in the back of her mind that last time she fought her and they were striking, she took advantage of an opportunistic mistake and then got the submission. So the accident happened quicker, if that makes sense. Maybe she thought in her head, I have enough faith in my ground game to do enough damage and to mitigate danger for the most part. And yeah, she's going to be relatively dangerous, but I trust in my grappling to be able to defend it all and to grind out a higher probability win. Maybe she looked at it like that. Maybe she thought, oh, she's a decent striker in Alexa Grasso. She can be dangerous on the feet. And maybe it's just going to be a safer path to victory to take it down. So potentially that's what she thought.
What were your thoughts overall, though, on the fight itself over 25 minutes?
Well,
probably not too much to say there, but
yeah, not too much to say there. So let's just move on to some more exciting topics on the card, I reckon.
Namely, I have the only man that fits that bill, particularly Diego Lopes, of course, doing what Diego Lopes does. And I was very close to my prediction. I said it would be a standing TKO against the fence.
Not
Ortega's chin nearly proved it to be such in that first round. He took a insanely tough 1-2. I saw a video on Twitter. It's almost like the second shot woke him back up.
It was a right hand
which I definitely
hook.
Subscribed to. Yeah.
Not
the right
1-2.
hand looked like it put his lights. Well, that's what I meant. 2 shots.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be pedantic.
No.
Just for the importance of the details,
Of course. I mean, it never really is a 1-2 with Lopes, is it? It's almost these wild flurries. He's throwing shots from all angles. But the second one of which landed, both of them landing flush on the chin. The second one almost waking him back up. And credit to Ortega for staying in that fight. That man has a heart of iron. I think it's probably the word. Probably something harder out there that is a more fitting description. Okay, very good. But yeah,
sorry,
I mean,
obviously
he was durable enough.
I just have that tick.
That's understandable. You're a West Ham fan. I understand. But I was very impressed with both men, in truth. But I think really, if I could say one thing that as a result of that 15 minutes and how dominant Lopes really found it, I know Ortega slowly grew into that fight, but he never really looked like close to finishing it. All it points to for me is for Ortega to move up a weight class. This weight cut to featherweight has always been quite tough on him. He just looks too slow. He looks too drained. I feel like that's been a story for a lot of his fights recently, and he's managed to prevail a couple times just through innate will and grit and determination, and that's really pulled him through as some of those hard fights wasn't enough against Lopez. So I'd like to see him at lightweight. I think he'd do a much better job up there. I think this is a bit of a slower pace, just a small amount, but enough for him to really close the gap. Obviously, his jiu-jitsu is inherently going to be dangerous. Doesn't matter who he's going against. I like to see him up there. And of course, Lopez, if we look on the other side of the coin, what's next for him? He's now got the number 3 rank, it looks like. So there's definitely an argument to be made of him jumping or leaping over the queue for a title shot. I don't know if maybe that's a little bit far-fetched. Maybe he needs one more fight, a title eliminator. But well, what do you think? Who would you put him against?
Firstly, Brian Ortega's been speaking about going to lightweight for a long time, so it was inevitable. He said before the fight he's going to lightweight, win or lose. So that is what he'll do next. He does need to do that. There are good fights for him there. Benil Dariush, Paddy Pimblett, Charles Oliveira, inevitably. There are very fun fights. He's way too big now to be 145er. And the fights that he's in are just taking brutal beatings whilst that depleted after nasty weight cuts. It's just for his own health. I don't think it's a smart move. Skill-based, I also think it's a smart move. But in regards to his longevity, I also think it would be very reasonable to go up now and not waste too much time. Give himself a couple of months off, grow into the frame a little bit, and then come back just healthy and refreshed in a new weight class. I think that'll be important. In regards to Lopez, the first 40 seconds of that fight, my first initial thought was, how fun is Diego Lopez versus Ilia Topuria? That was my first thought.
I honestly, that scares me. That scares me thinking of that matchup. I think Topuria chins him brutally. I do. I think there's one critique I think you can say about Lopez, which is almost a compliment at the same time, is just how willing he is to not give a shit about anything.
See, before, I would always agree with you. In fact, I even used that in my breakdowns of when I'd done his fights. But this fight showed me a different level to Diego Lopez because he did have Brian Ortega hurt. He did also strike at range. He did throw combinations and then defend. He didn't always just blitz, chaos. He was a lot more calculated and knew that, of course, Brian Ortega is hard to finish and has to be somewhat more reserved. So I saw a different level that I'm thinking, what if Diego Lopez comes out and now he starts boxing and he starts patiently boxing and then creating that chaos when needed instead of just being all out, which you can't do against the very, very best. And he starts blending it together. I'm thinking, that's dangerous for someone like Ilia Topuria, because can you see a world in where, let's just say, I'm asking you this as a question, they both have 8 weeks to prepare, 10 weeks to prepare, they're fresh, they're both coming into this healthy. Can you see a world in where Ilia Topuria comes out and ragdolls Diego Lopez in the grappling?
I can definitely envision it. I'm not going to sit here and say it can happen. That?
Really?
I could see it happening, yeah. I think he's freakishly strong. I feel like people aren't... That's one thing about Topuria, as much as the praise he gets...
And Diego Lopez isn't?
I don't think they do give him enough credit with his strength. I think people will forget that. Do you remember that way? I don't know if you remember this, but there was a moment against...
Bryce Mitchell.
I believe it was Bryce Mitchell, where, I don't know the exact move, but he basically just tossed him over.
Listen.
In that scramble. Yeah. That really opened my eyes.
2 things to this. You're 100% right, and I 100% agree with you. Slight nuance to that Bryce Mitchell fight. Bryce Mitchell did have food poisoning. I'm not saying that would have not looked like that potentially. 100% it could have done. But that's something to consider. Ilia Topuria is freakishly strong, low center of gravity, incredible technique. So just a combination of those things is very, very aggressive. And I've seen that footage. What I would say is we've also seen the same from Diego Lopez, but in a different way. Now, he's probably going to be somewhat accepting to some positions because his jiu-jitsu is so innovative and is so well set up between movements. No one's going to want to take him down and try and play any game of passing guard and getting offense off. If you're getting offense off, you're going to have to give some space. And if you give space to Diego Lopes, he's inverting on your legs, he's throwing up triangles, then he's changing it to inverted triangles and arm bars. Maybe he's jumping for triangles. It's a very dangerous game to play. It's like,
I agree,
a Charles Oliveira with more horsepower. He just brings this devastating energy into his exchanges, which is a problem for people. So I'm not saying he goes out and starches Ilya, but I'm saying it's a good fight competitively.
I mean, I never disagree with that. I will forever say that's an awesome fight. If I just had to visualize how that would go, I do fear for Diego Lopez's safety on the striking front, just because it's just in those moments of flurries. And when he really takes the front foot with those, sort of, 3-4 shots, he does leave his chin out there. And, it goes both ways, because obviously there's a case to be made that the best offense is, or best defense is a good offense, rather, which you could definitely say with a lot of cases with Lopez. But Topuria could definitely be that man to just duck under a couple of those shots, find that chin with one right hand, and it's done. That's what it takes with a guy like him. Let's not beat around the bush. He hits like an absolute freight train. Doesn't matter how good your chin is. So, I mean, the excitement, the thought of that matchup does definitely excite me. Do I think he deserves it yet? I think one more fight. I think one more. I think you have to give him the title eliminator. And I think the only logical pick there is the winner of Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling.
Yeah, I like it.
I think that's an easy answer, because obviously you got the narrative with Movsar. Obviously, Lopez, if you don't know, lost on his debut, short notice, to Movsar, who was undefeated, still is undefeated, but had him very close within a knee bar, and I can't remember what the other submission was.
Triangle, I think it was.
Yeah, I believe it was a triangle. I mean, very close on 2 occasions in beating a man who had never been beaten. So, and he left that night with a loss on his record, but far more recognition from the fans than Evloev ever would have got. So there's obviously the narrative that carries there. Sterling, he speaks for himself as a former champion, arguably, in my opinion, the bantamweight GOAT. What else needs to be said there? Great matchup, great storyline. And I think the only logical pick for Diego Lopez next. But I'm excited to see where he goes. He is, what's the phrase, about fighter's favorite fighter? Something like that. I agree with that completely, and he's one of mine too, and I know yours as well. Is there anything else on the card that stood out to you in particular?
I think Raul Rosas Jr. is very impressive with that performance. Wasn't the most exciting, don't get me wrong, but it was professional. And the fact that he's 19 years of age, just racking up professional wins, super impressive. Understanding when to be more aggressive, understanding when to secure rounds and takedowns, being more patient on the feet, looking more refined on the feet, just clearly adding to his game, both physically and mentally, every single fight at such a young age, and just ticking off another box. A Richie Lang, seasoned vet in the UFC, and a difficult opponent to get, to be perfectly honest. Ticked it off, very smart performance, professional performance, moves on, done a great job with the marketing. When he came out and hit that Chihuihuas for the first ever time, I thought, what the hell was that noise he made? And then I saw the backlash online, and I just thought, this is a genius move. Genius move. As I always say to you, a tagline, a slogan, a one-worded brand, it is infinitely more memorable. And people just want a slogan and a tagline to shout at you or to say to you or to remember your brand by. So he's done a great job. And that sort of segues into when I was leaving the arena on Saturday, it happened again. So I'm leaving.
For what? Just to clarify.
For Bellator. So I'll go into the event, but I'll just start with the ending first. As I'm leaving the arena, normally I didn't have it filmed, but I spoke to Luke Trainer after his win anyway, just because where the media bit was, they had to go walk there. So I saw him multiple times and we had a conversation. But then as I was leaving, he was doing his media scrum. So they had all the media there and all their cameras on. And I just gave him like a wave just before he started it. And he just dropped a keep it casual on me. And I was like, perfect.
I was actually going to say that. I was going to make a joke about keep it casual there.
Yeah, he just dropped one on me perfectly in front of the cameras. And I was like, yes. I was like, that's absolutely perfect timing. But coming back to the actual event, that's why it was quite tiring to start for the UFC, because there was a Bellator card in Wembley the same evening. So I worked at that event, and it was quite a full circle moment for me, because for anyone that doesn't know, Wembley is where my last job was before I quit and went Casuals Corner full time, because as I've explained before, I needed a job that had flexibility, that had no minimal responsibilities, so that I didn't have to take work home, and I could be very flexible with my days, so I could do Casuals Corner on the other days with interviews and traveling to gyms. But it was horrible. It was a horrible job, but it was in Wembley, and I'd have to get up there for 6 a.m. before just spending the days doing manual labour.
Other side of London for you as well, isn't it?
Yeah, completely other side of London. So the journey was about an hour and a half at sort of 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning. It's just horrible journeys, getting to horrible jobs and just working on crappy posts in between that. So one of the first events I went to was a Bellator card, and I remember standing at the top of the stadium and just thinking, there was a commentary booth right in front of me. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, next time I'll be there, or at least the next couple of times I'll be there, or I'll be in the media. And so this was the next time that I ended up going to Wembley. It was 2 years or 16 months after I've quit that job, and I was in the media as full-time doing it for Casuals Corner. So it was a cool 180 moment. I had the Casuals clothing on, and I even posted a video today of a day in the life that I took 2 years ago, and I reposted it today because it was on my way past like the O2, past Wembley, and going to just a long day and just grinding on Casuals Corner on the side. So yeah, that was a cool event to go to. I know it was a bit long-winded, but that was
no, of course. I mean, you can obviously fill myself and the listeners in if we just dive into that very quickly, but there was a couple of the guys from GBTT training there, competing there rather. So if you could
yeah, that was cool, because
let us know.
For context, the first ever Bellator card that I went to, the one that I just mentioned, had Luke Trainer on the card. Now, I didn't know him at the time. I just knew mutually of him, and he won by elbow, and it was a really, really good performance. Also, the first PFL event that I ever worked, which was also in London, which is in the Copper Box Arena, was the one where Simeon Powell won by calf kicks. And that was in PFL. So that was the first time I worked PFL, first time I watched Bellator was with those guys. Obviously, I've worked at GB Top Team or freelance, but worked with them on projects for over a year now, over a couple of years probably, on and off. So when I used to work that job, that's where I would go on the days that I took off. I'd go to GB Top Team so I could film there and do work. And obviously, those guys, in regards to Simeon and Luke, they train it. So I've spent a good amount of time with them sort of over the years and whatnot, seen their careers, and it was cool to be ringside and watch them both get wins. Luke Trainer got a really impressive first round submission, and then Sim had to just dig in the trenches for his win. And it was close. He could have gone either way. Like there's no secret about that. It was very, very close. He could have easily not got his hand raised. But I said to him backstage, I said, sometimes when you're in front of this whole crowd, it's all friends, it's all family, because he used to work in Wembley Arena. So he used to actually work there as a steward. And now he was the co-main, which was an incredible story. And I said, sometimes it's cool to get the big knockouts and those crazy moments, but sometimes it's important to dig deep and show people what you've got in front of the home crowd as well. So it was really cool to see both of them get the win in different but impressive fashions. And also to work the event was a really nice touch. Feeling grateful.
So busy day for you then, of course.
It was.
That and watching the Sphere card. Anything, actually, this is what I was going to ask you about. What is on the t-shirt you've got going on there? Because that, to me, unless I'm mistaken, looks like a conceptual design. Or am I just wrong?
So what you're seeing on the t-shirt is the first rough sketches of the UFC Manchester comic. So when I first started working on the comic and I reached out to the designer just to get some sketches for the cover idea, he just done some pencil sketches off the top of my head. I got them sent over because I always think they're super cool. And then I got printed on the t-shirt. So this is the pencil design for Michael Bisping with the UK flag. And this was just a part of the sort of mood board process of the Casuals comic, which you can probably see just at the top of the background, the one with Bisping on it. So these are just some of the concept designs that I've been working on, and so I'm just making an effort to just wear them in my videos, really.
Very cool. Anything else you're working on right now in the last couple of weeks? Obviously, I know you're inherently always busy, and there's always something going on.
honestly,
so I'm expecting something.
Dialed in my priorities with my brand, with my business, and with different elements of it. And I've just tried to trim away the fat and really create a structure that I can follow mostly every day. And a big part of that has been just refining my strategy on socials with all of my platforms. But another part of that is the TWC, Toe Wrestling Championships. I have been going all in to the TWC, and I'm going to drop an exclusive for you here. So anyone gets to the end of this episode can get this. And whether this comes to fruition or not, I'm not too sure. But what we're working on at the moment is some of the best inspirations in martial arts and the creative scene, how they've collaborated in recent years, is Pride with their posters. And they are just incredible. And we obviously want to create history every time we create an event of the TWC 2, 4, 6, 100, 200, like the UFC. Now, we obviously create lovely clothing for that. But what I wanted to do is also sponsor for next year the match day program and create a casuals comic, TWC collaboration, match day program.
I love it.
So it includes the comic of the beginning of the sport and where it is and how it's growing. It also includes the clothing, but I'm in the process of reaching out to the designer of the Pride posters to do a full-scale branding collaboration with the TWC for the next event. So we'll have posters that you'll be able to buy there, created by the original Pride designer of the posters, and it's obviously going to be TWC inspired. And then obviously we'll use that for clothing as well. So we'll have the clothing, the designs, the match day programs, all themed in with the Pride creator and with everything that we're doing right now.
I love it.
I've got one more. I got one more thing to it.
Please.
I'll add to it because there's a lot of things that I've been working on with it, and also with casuals clothing, a large part of that has always been the sport element of it. That's always what I like to wear. That's always what I'm doing a lot of the times. And it's always just what I find comfortable. So I always saw years ago, and it sounds grand and it sounds silly now because obviously it's at the start, but I always believed in a Nike, a Gymshark, a Gym King, these sizes with casuals in regards to the sport.
As you should.
100%. And I know what that requires. I'm not delusional to a point, but where I see the branding is how I see that. So what I've also reached out to the TWC and what I would like to do for 2025 is be the main sponsor for the sports clothing. So we want to legitimize the sport.
I love that. That's genius.
I also want to branch my sports clothing because I've been working on the sliders, the socks, and things of that nature. So what I've started doing is started creating the branded designs for the sliders and the socks, and that's going to be the sort of uniform, if you like, in between matches. So we're going to be able to legitimize the matches. We're going to be able to have actually nice apparel to wear as the athletes, because that's an important element to it. And then of course I'm actually going to look closer into the technology of like the positioning of the socks, because if you have a certain alignment with your toes, it enables more explosivity and more strength in the leg. So I've started looking into the science of it as well. So I'm all in right now on the TWC.
Is there any science on it? This is what I'm saying.
Of course. Surely
you have to write the rule book here. Like almost.
So this is the fun thing, right? So what we have now is a blank canvas of a sport. So we get to create everything. So as I'm sitting there on the Friday evening, just brainstorming documents, I'm thinking we need signals. The same way that in tennis, the same way in cricket, the same way in wrestling, you have to have uniform communication signals between the referee and the audience watching so that you have a visual cue as well. So, for example, in cricket, it's a wide and it's a 4. In toe wrestling, it'll be a breakaway and a point or whatever it may be. So the correct terminology and the correct phrasing. But we get to create all of it. This is what I'm saying. This is why it's fun. But they're the elements that I would love to help with in regards to the clothing and that. But the last thing I'll say is, of course, like anything physical, whenever it's... What I've realized is of course, it is still fun and it's still a laugh. Don't get it twisted. But what I'm also realizing is the reason people are confused about it or react quickly to it is because it's so simple. But what I'm realizing with anything, when something's simple, there's more detail in the fewer layers to the game. So what I'm starting to notice is the importance to core strength, for example, is the importance to have flexibility within the calves and within the front of the legs so that you have a stronger ankle mobility, so that you have stronger torque there. So I'm starting to realize all the strength and conditioning around it. And then I'm starting to realize it all comes back to knee health. If you can get your knees healthy, then you can get your legs healthy. If you get your legs healthy, you get your ankles healthy because everything's interconnected. Then I'm realizing that we can leverage the knee health with the whole movement with knees over toes. So I'm going to start doing the program of knees over toes and garner that into the world of toe wrestling, which also legitimizes the sport. But more than that, captures a larger audience to just improve health generally with some easy takeaway steps, and how improving your knee health, for example, can just improve your overall life because your lower back pain will ease potentially because there's a lot of tightness in the glutes, in the hamstrings. So I'm going down the element of giving the value and redirecting it to toe wrestling and providing the best product possible in every capacity.
All roads lead to toe wrestling.
And all roads lead to toe wrestling. Taken from Karate Combat, from our conversations with Asim, taken from Dana White, Craig Jones, from Rory Sutherland.
Did you show that to him, by the way?
Which one?
Asim. Did you show him?
I've been making some content, but I will send him some personally as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you know how excited I am. You know,
you've got me off on a tangent. You know, I've gone off on you can't get me talking about toe wrestling because
Hey, you brought it up. I didn't say anything about toe wrestling.
I get there's too many angles to spin with.
You brought it up,
and I'm so excited by it.
I can sense the excitement. I can sense the excitement for it.
I'll be real with you. I'm standing at Bellator the other day, right?
And you're thinking about toe wrestling.
Fantastic show. Don't get me wrong. But every time that I'm at these shows, I can't help think but the TWC, because you just get to seeing the finished product is fun and it's cool. But what's more cool is creating the product along the road and leveling it up in different ways, with the lighting, with the coordination, with the commentary, with the live stream.
If you ever need anyone on commentary, I would be more than happy.
It's funny you say this, right? So you've given me an idea off the back of you saying that, but a girl that works on the team, this is why I get so excited, because it's not just the product, it's not the business, it's not that, it's the team that are working on it are so talented. So one of the girls that works with the team on the events, she is a journalist who writes for The Guardian, BBC, all of these different mainstream platforms. But she said the other day, she just said, I'm just trying to find where I work best in the sport at the moment. Long story short, she done a voiceover commentary on a playback for one of the finals, and we did a reaction video to it, a breakdown video of it, me and Paul, of just reacting to this video. So we can hear the commentary as well. First ever time she'd done it, and oh my goodness, she was an absolute natural. Yeah. Mate, she sounded like watching the cup highlights on BBC round 3 on her first ever goal. I was like, is this her first ever time she's done this? And yeah, I was like, that's impressive. Bearing in mind that I just watch videos and voice them over and commentate on them pretty much all day. I know that is not easy to do. And to do that on a sport she doesn't know, she had delayed playback. I was like, she is the Joe Rogan of the sport. So just nurture that as her as the commentator. And I think that'll be very, very important, because every big sport needs a famous commentator, and she is it for sure. Or she's one of them. So I'm sure that I honestly think one day you're going to be making a video on the toe wrestling. I really do think that.
Yeah. The thing is, you say that, but every time I do a video that's not about the UFC, it tends to do fucking awful. So, mate, I mean, I would.
You know what I thought of this? I thought of a lot of things until one of my videos is just continuing to go sizzler. So one of the videos that I made was doing well on all platforms, and then it just continues growing and growing and growing. And now it's on like TikTok of like 200,000 views. It's got like 10,000 shares of how to become a professional toe wrestler. And then there's another influencer who's in Germany or something, I think it is, who's a big YouTuber. He came over to England and wrestled the champion of the TWC. It's got 2 million views on TikTok. The TWC's content is getting 100,000 views, 20,000 views. So the attention's already starting to flow in. I'm starting to see it's insane. It's insane. So it won't be long.
Pretty hectic for you then.
It is hectic.
It's never not, is it? It never isn't.
I love it.
I mean, ask any man if they're working on toe wrestling championships. They're probably gonna have a pretty hectic schedule. Let's be real. That's the first thing you say when someone asks you, "What have you been doing?" Oh yeah, just pioneering a new entire sport where you wrestle with toes. I think that sets a pretty good precedent. I mean, for me, it's. Sorry.
Look, the last thing I'll say to it, and then I want to hear developments with you. The last thing I'll say to it is, I believe with the entire sport, the easiest change that we can make, and this is something that I've learned from Rory Sutherland and something that anyone selling or sharing anything in their brand can learn from that guy. Rory Sutherland is a genius with things like that. But the phrasing is so important. Such a small change, but can have profound impact. And obviously the tagline is getting it to be an Olympic sport. And the goal is that eventually. I said the important thing with the phrasing is when we talk about it, we can also talk about it as just wrestling, right? As just wrestling. So you wouldn't say upper body wrestling when you think of the full contact. Yeah. So sometimes with toe wrestling, we'll just refer to it as wrestling as a part of the body. But the reason I say that is because what I want to start doing with their podcast is speaking to high level wrestlers or wrestling coaches and learning about the sport. So I can just learn it from an MMA sense. So I want to pick their brain from that, but I want to hear how it can be crossed over, or at least some fundamentals that can be crossed over with balance and manipulation and agility and core strength or even just mindset to toe wrestling. So phrasing, I think, is a big point with that. But how's it been in the world of Leo Cooper YouTube? Hit me.
Well, just quickly out of YouTube, you spoke about wrestling. I've been trying to develop my stand-up game.
True.
In terms of my wrestling, incorporating with jiu-jitsu. I'm terrible at it. So there's not going to be much I say there. I will say cardio-wise, it is grueling. My God. Shooting takedowns and standing up, man, it is absolutely draining. And I suck at it. But I acknowledge that. I'm willing to improve. But on the YouTube front, I've been doing a lot of thinking about balance. That's something I always say. I know you very much subscribe to that too, is trying to balance every element of your life. But in the work side of things, I think it's more about variation. At least it is to me. I always said I get bored quite easily. I need stimulation from different sources creatively to really
TWC.
keep me to keep me stable essentially. And I think an element that I'm starting to realize is I spoke about right before we were just jumping on air is the burnout side of things, struggling to find the motivation. And I think a lot of that comes with the core idea that I'm working from home. I'm working in my room.
Oh my God, it's so weird you said
working
this.
in this same place. And I realize it's because I know I speak a lot about games being one of my big passions. There's something I like to do to wind down sometimes if I've not got anything on, if I'm not hanging out with my friends. Okay, I'll just play a game. But I really struggle to do that now. A lot of times I'll just stare at my computer screen because I finish my work or whatever I'm doing. Yeah. I'll sit there and I'll look at my screen saying, I don't really want to do anything anymore. And then I'll spend my free time, if I'm doing anything just by myself, not doing anything at all, trying to figure out what to do. And then by the time we know it, I got to go to sleep. And it's like, I keep doing that. I realize I know how I need to counteract that now. I've been thinking about doing this. I spoke to a friend about it, but I'm looking at the idea of potentially hiring a space or renting a space, even if it's just a desk. Ideally it would be like a room or something up in London. So I'd have to go and commute there to work and go somewhere to do it. And one that would raise I think I spoke about this a long time ago, but I almost erased it from my brain. But that would just up my productivity levels so much because it gives me a more sense of purpose. I think segregates my work and my leisure a lot more, which I think is actually quite an important thing. Because for me, it almost kind of blends into one. Because as I said, I'm sitting up in one space at the time. It all blends together, and I don't think that's a really healthy thing to do long term. So that's something I'm looking at doing. I don't know if you have any experience in that regard, but I can see you'll definitely approve, judging by your facial expressions.
Yeah, I was getting excited when you were saying that and saying that's so weird is because I've had that exact revelation recently. And the reason was because of everything we spoke about. I went into the office of the people that own the TWC and we were just having a chat. We went for lunch. We were just talking about the business. And we went into the office and shot some work. And we were talking about, I was talking about how I used to work in London, obviously working from home now. And they were talking about how they used to work in Sunderland in their office. And the people that they were around was not very inspirational. There wasn't people doing what they were doing. And so it was just kind of a bit numb. And then they went into this office where everyone was within a similar sector. It was very creative and they constantly had different ideas bouncing around and more inspiration, and how much it just leveled up the process. And I really felt that when I was in the office, and I hadn't been in that environment in a long time, and I saw the value of it. So I said to them, I'd like to go in the office at least once, or sort of maybe once a week, twice a week tops, so we can record some content, but also be around that to get some more ideas and to get some good inspiration. So I think that's a really good idea with what you said. But what I will say is I know I said earlier and I was somewhat joking, but the more I'm thinking about it, the more I think this would actually be perfect is when I said about you'll eventually be creating some videos for them, for around the sport. This wouldn't obviously necessarily be a permanent basis, but something I think you should definitely set up. I think you'd take good value in it, is working out how to create some content with those guys and making a video around it, and also going into the office one of these days, maybe it's like one day or something, in a few weeks, where you spend the day in the office there, you can get your work done or whatnot, but also you can work on this particular project and maybe get some of the footage and bounce ideas or whatever it may be. And I think that you could create some great content out of it, because it's the story behind it is ridiculous, as you'll know. It is literally hot fuzz and it's brilliant. Yeah. And I think you could just create some fun content out of it. But I also think it could scratch an itch in regards to being around a creative team as well.
Yeah, I love that. 100%. Yeah. I mean, I'd probably do it not necessarily on my channel. I wouldn't say it like that, but I'd be happy to do that, but probably on a not hiring basis, but you know what I'm saying? Like as like a, I don't know how to describe
whatever the logistics and whatever the content are, it's a story for another day. But my point is, something like that would be good to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's all about variation. As I said, I think that's always the key to everything is just varying what you do in your work and your life and everything in between. I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up, unless you've got anything else to get off your chest.
No.
Good. This has been the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 68, and we will see you hopefully next Sunday. Have a good one.